Everyone says I'm the biggest simp for Luis. I crack walnuts for him with my bare hands, go out at 3 a.m. with a high fever to buy him roasted sweet potatoes. Even when his white moonlight returned, I was the one who went to pick her up at the airport, Luis said. Just a substitute to pass the time. They all said I was sick in the head. You know you're just a stand-in, but you still go running to him. I lowered my eyes. Oh, but Luis is also a substitute. Chapter 1. At night, I wasn't feeling well, so I checked my temperature, 39.6 degrees Celsius. I took some medicine and planned to lie down. Then my phone rang. Meet at the encounter bar. Come over. The voice on the other end was full of noise. Luis's voice sounded drunk. I sighed. But I'm not feeling well. If you're not dead, get over here. I changed clothes, got a cab, and took off the fever patch from my forehead before going into the bar. The medicine and fever patch didn't seem to help much. My body still felt frighteningly hot. The ear-splitting music in the bar made my head throb with dull pain. When I found Luis, he was leaning over the table, playing with dice, with a girl on either side of him. I walked over and said to one of the girls, "Could you move, please?" She looked at me, displeased. "Who are you?" For a moment, I didn't know what to say, to put it in their words. I was just Luis's simp. The girl could see the situation clearly. Luis didn't care about me at all, which only made her more audacious. There are plenty of people who like Luis. You're nothing. But here you are acting like his girlfriend. Am I right, Luis? Luis glanced at me without saying anything, then picked up his glass, drinking as he asked the girl, "What do you want to eat?" The girl's eyes gleamed. "I want pecans. With shells." Luis completely ignored me and called the waiter. After a while, a plate of pecans with cracked shells was brought over. If you wanted the pecans inside, you'd have to pry the shells open by hand. The girl spoke again, her voice sweet and coy. "Luis, have her crack the pecans for me. I want to eat them." I looked at Luis. Luis downed the drink in his hand, then draped his arm over the girl's shoulder, playing with her hair absent-mindedly. He turned to me, his eyes blurred from drunkenness. "Do you have something to say?" I looked at him calmly. "Do you want me to do it?" ******. He suddenly got angry, kicking the table, and a few pecans rolled to the ground. "Crack them. Use your hands." "Okay." Under the deafening music and dazzling lights, I started cracking them by hand, bit by bit. Pecans have shells much harder than the paper shell walnuts you find in the market. The sharp edges of the shell cut my fingertips. Blood began to seep out, and I casually grabbed a tissue to wipe it away. Then I continued. The pile of tissues stained with my blood grew on the floor. The laughter and chatter at the booth gradually quieted down, and they all stared at me. My fingers were covered in blood. "Luis." I looked up. He was initially looking at me, but as soon as I raised my head, he turned his face away, taking occasional sips of the beer on the table, pretending not to hear what I said. I called out again, "Luis." Without looking at me, he replied impatiently, "Talk. There are no tissues left. Could you get me a pack?" He suddenly slammed the beer mug onto the table, turning to glare at me furiously. "That's all you had to say?" I didn't understand why he was so angry. Frowning in confusion as I looked at him, he gritted his teeth. "No tissues? Lick it clean yourself." Blood kept seeping from my fingertips. I wiped it on my dress. The white dress instantly absorbed the red stains, bright and garish. I heard the girl who had originally asked for the pecan say, "Is she out of her mind?" Then came a sudden loud bang. Luis smashed the bottle in his hand. Glass shards and beer spilled everywhere. The girl screamed in fright. "Luis, what's wrong with you?" With a dark expression, Luis stood up. "Boring. I'm out." I didn't move. Luis shouted at me, "Not done cracking those pecans?" I stood up calmly, but in the next second, an intense dizziness made my vision go black. As I lost consciousness, the mocking voices around me echoed in my ears. "Unbelievable. She's got a fever, and still comes whenever Luis calls. No wonder she's Luis's #1 simp." Chapter 2. It's no wonder they talk like that. Luis never hesitated to say in front of his friends, "Just need a stand-in to pass the time." And every time, they would all turn their heads to look at me. I just sat there quietly, no crying, no fuss, no anger, willingly playing the stand-in. I was obedient and compliant by his side. But even Luis had times when he got tired of me. One stormy night, he threw me out of the car on the side of the road. No matter how much you try, you're not her. Don't bother me again, I said. I'll think of something else. You're sick. He drove away, leaving me in the dust. After that, I didn't seek him out for about 3 months. Then, out of nowhere, he angrily appeared in front of me. Didn't you say you'd think of something? I answered truthfully. I'm still thinking. Haven't figured it out yet. He roughly pulled me into the car. Come with me somewhere. Since then, I started showing up by Luis's side again. One night, I got a call from one of his friends. Luis passed out drunk. When I got there, Luis was lying on the sofa, his face pale, looking like he wasn't even breathing, like he was dead. My mind went blank, buzzing. It wasn't until I felt his heart still beating that my tears stopped. You're crying as if Luis really died. Relax. He's just drunk, not dead. But I still wasn't reassured. I took him to the hospital to check his heart anyway. That night, I stayed with Luis the whole time. He woke up before me and was scrolling through his phone. His friends had taken videos of me crying over him like I was mourning, and sent them in the group chat, mocking me. Were you really that scared I'd die? Luis asked me. I raised my hand to feel his heartbeat, steady, strong, beat by beat. Luis said, even if I had a new heart, I'd be fine. Hard to kill. My eyes dimmed for a moment. That heartbeat, clearly pulsing under my palm. That heart used to belong to someone else. Chapter 3. When I woke up in the hospital, as expected, Luis wasn't there. The nurse came over to take my temperature. It had already gone down. My fingers, injured from cracking pecans, were bandaged. Luis didn't reach out to me during that time. A month later, his group of friends suddenly started a bet. Roma's coming back. Let's bet. How much longer will Alice stay by Luis's side? A week, a month, 3 months. Roma was Luis's dream girl. That night, I got a call from Luis. Drive to the airport and pick someone up. When Roma saw me, she looked me up and down from head to toe. Such a poor imitation. I can't believe Luis kept you around for so long. I drove quietly, not responding to her words. At a red light, Roma met my eyes through the rearview mirror. I heard you were the one who chased Luis. And before that, your boyfriend died in a car accident. Luis also had heart surgery during that time. Chapter 4. I slammed on the brakes. Roma, who wasn't wearing her seatbelt in the back seat, lunged forward and banged her head against the front seat. Are you crazy? Do you even know how to drive? I pointed at the red light. If I didn't, you wouldn't have a chance to speak to me right now. She angrily fastened her seatbelt, then started fixing her makeup. She finally stayed quiet for the rest of the ride. We reached the private room. As soon as I opened the door, everyone inside turned their eyes on me. They looked me up and down, then started mocking me. A fake is just a fake. When the real one appears, it's unbearable to look at. The room erupted in laughter. Roma gave me a sidelong glance, her eyes filled with ridicule. Even Luis was different from usual today. He had put away his usual nonchalance. Dressed in a white shirt, sitting upright, he had deliberately left an empty seat beside him. I used to sit there. Now Roma walked over to it automatically. I turned to leave. Luis called out to me. Did I say you could leave? We'll be drinking later. You'll drive Roma home. Thinking about last time when he drank until he passed out, I glanced at his heart, frowning. Don't drink too much. His friends burst into laughter again. She still doesn't know her place. Roma's back. Does she think it's her place to worry about him? She's been a stand-in so long. She actually thinks she matters. I walked to a corner and sat down, taking out my phone to quietly play Candy Crush. The noise on that side of the room picked up, and someone suggested playing Truth or Dare. I don't know if it was a real coincidence or if they were deliberately trying to match Roma with Luis. The mouth of the bottle ended up pointing at Roma 3 times in a row. For the first 2 times, Roma chose Truth. The first time, someone asked her, "Why did you come back this time?" Roma said, "For someone." The room filled with knowing laughter. The second time, someone asked her, "Is that person here?" Roma's ears turned red. Yes. Why not just blurt out Luis's ID number? Don't. The whole point is to see it and not say it. The third time, Roma wanted to choose truth again, but they stopped her. You can only choose the same option twice in a row. The third time you have to pick the other option. Roma had no choice but to choose to dare. Pick one of the guys here and give him a kiss. Roma blushed and, without hesitation, turned to kiss Luis on the corner of his lips. The scene of them kissing froze in time. I happened to look up and met Luis's eyes. I ignored it, switching from Candy Crush to WeChat, finding the group where they started that poll. How much longer will Alice stay by Luis's side? One day. That was my choice. Whoa. Who voted just one day? That's cold. Amid the suggestive atmosphere, someone suddenly spoke up. Voter Alice? They turned to look at me. I locked my phone, then looked up. Is there a prize for winning? Luis looked at me with a dark expression. Alice. What do you mean? Starting tomorrow, I won't come to you anymore. He gritted his teeth. What right do you have to make that decision? I'm the one who decides if you can come or not. I pointed at Roma. Then why not make her leave? You're just a stand-in. Do you think you're worthy? I nodded. Then I guess I will win. Luis's face twisted in anger. No one dared make a sound. After a long moment, someone broke the tension. Come on, it's just a game. Why bring up bets? Let's keep playing. They resumed the game of truth or dare. This time, the bottle pointed at Luis. Luis, what's your choice? Luis's tone was still off. Dare. Are you up for it? Then, pick a girl here and kiss her. I watched Luis turn and hold Roma, kissing her without hesitation. Everyone clapped and cheered. My stomach started to burn, rising into nausea. What followed was a wave of sharp pain. I clutched my stomach, my face turning pale. Finally, unable to bear it anymore, I rushed into the private room's bathroom and threw up. The pain in my stomach only grew worse. I curled up on the bathroom floor, so delirious that I started hallucinating. I thought I saw Sam. My Sam. Chapter 5. Sam and I had been together since high school. We were each other's first love, went to the same university, and stayed in the same city to work. Originally, we could have had a wonderful future. The year we graduated, I worked hard as an intern to secure a permanent position, often forgetting to eat. Skipping meals eventually led to stomach problems. One night, I was working late, and I hadn't eaten all day. The pain from my stomach condition flared up, and I curled up at my workstation. The medicine I usually had on hand had run out. Sam came to pick me up after work, and when he saw me, his eyes were filled with concern. He poured me a cup of warm water, told me to rest, and went out to buy medicine. He'd only been gone for a short while when I felt a bit better. Turning around, I noticed he had left his phone by the water dispenser, worried that he might not have enough cash. I picked up his phone and went to find him. When I got downstairs, I noticed a crowd gathering on the opposite side of the street. Some people walked briskly past me, heading toward the crowd. Seems like someone got hit by a car over there. My heart sank. I told myself not to overthink it, but I couldn't control myself and walked toward the crowd. I saw Sam. He was lying in a pool of blood. Scattered next to him was the stomach medicine he'd gone to buy for me. Sam, Sam! I ran to his side, crying. He lay there covered in blood. I didn't dare hold him, unsure where I could touch him without causing pain. I wanted to call the police, to call an ambulance, but my hands wouldn't obey me. My hands holding the phone were trembling. All I could do was cry and plead with the bystanders. Please, someone help me. Please help us. Some tried to comfort me. Don't worry, miss. We've already called for help. Others took out their phones to record us. Such a loving couple. Sam opened his eyes and, with great difficulty, said, "Don't cry." I cried even harder, wanting so badly to hold him, but too afraid of hurting him. All I could do was sob and keep calling his name. Sam, 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 Sam. He slowly raised his hand and covered my face. Don't let them film you. You still need to get married in the future. The ambulance pulled up beside us. The paramedics came down with a stretcher. Sam's hand slipped, inch by inch, from my face. I quickly reached out to grab it, but I couldn't feel his pulse. No, Sam, no. February 14th, 10:13 p.m. I lost Sam. Chapter 6. The bathroom door was kicked open, and I saw Luis. With him were Roma and his group of friends. They all stood over me, looking down at my disheveled state. I told you. She's not that carefree. She's just doing this on purpose to make Luis pity her. Quite the actress. Huh? Wasn't she all tough just now? Now she's acting all pitiful. I was sitting against the wall, clutching my stomach, when suddenly a basin of cold water poured over my head. I shivered, looking up to see Luis, the culprit, staring at me with cold eyes. You're just a stand-in, but you act so much. Even a plastic bag doesn't hold as much crap as you do. Disgusting. Soaked and miserable, I looked at his chest where his heart was. At this moment, I finally let go. He only had Sam's heart, but he had nothing to do with Sam. Sam would never have poured cold water on me. He wouldn't have made me buy roasted sweet potatoes for him in the middle of the night when I had a fever. He wouldn't have intentionally humiliated me, making me work for another woman. He wouldn't have forced drinks on me. He wouldn't have let his friends ridicule me. He wouldn't have embarrassed me. I stood up, walked through them, and headed for the door of the private room, leaving a trail of water behind me. Just as I was about to walk out the door, Luis yelled at me, "Alice, did I fucking say you could leave?" I kept walking. Luis's furious voice chased after me. "If you leave now, don't ever show up in front of me again to disgust me." I closed the door behind me. Chapter 7. I went to see a therapist. After Sam's death, I was diagnosed with severe depression. I have been undergoing treatment ever since. Ryan has always been my primary therapist. I greeted him with a smile. "Ryan, how have you been lately?" "It doesn't matter how I am. What's important is how you're doing," I answered truthfully. "I think I'm getting better. I can now accept that he has nothing to do with Sam." Ryan, however, frowned suddenly. "I don't think so. When something that a person clings to vanishes, they may find it impossible to go on. It's like their mental support collapses, and their world crumbles. I'm really worried that one day, when the thing you've been clinging to is gone, what will become of you?" I still smiled. "It won't happen. Look, I'm fine now, aren't I?" Ryan sighed. "Let's just do the test first." The diagnosis came out, and it was still severe depression. Ryan looked frustrated. "You're the most well-behaved patient I've ever had, but also the one with the least progress. You've begun to make me question my professional abilities." I turned the tables to comfort him. "Don't worry. I think your treatment is working." He gave a bitter smile. "In any case, Alice, I still hope you'll get through this and live a good life." Chapter 8. It's been a long time since I've seen Luis, and I had completely deleted his contact information. When I had nothing to do, I'd go shopping or have a meal with my good friend Elise. Everything was going well. But suddenly, Luis appeared in front of me again. One afternoon, Elise and I went shopping, and we got tired, so we went to a tea restaurant for a meal. Halfway through eating, Luis and Roma walked in. The restaurant wasn't crowded today. There were plenty of empty seats, but Luis chose the seat right across from me. He sat side by side with Roma, and when their dessert was served, Roma fed spoonfuls to his mouth. Sometimes she pouted for him to feed her, and he scooped up small bites for her as well. The two of them were affectionate, like a couple in the early stages of love. I looked down at my empty plate and asked Elise, "Are you done? Should we go?" "Sure. Let's go." As we were leaving, there was a loud crash behind us. Roma screamed, "Luis, your hand is bleeding." I suddenly remembered that even when Luis got a small cut from a knife, he'd wake me up in the middle of the night to bandage him. At first, he always complained the bandages were ugly. A grown man insisted that I tie them with bows. Eventually, I learned many ways to tie bandages, but this time, I didn't even look back and left the restaurant. Chapter 9. In the middle of the night, I woke up feeling thirsty. I got up to get some water and noticed there were over a dozen missed calls from unfamiliar numbers on my phone. After drinking water, I called one of the numbers back. Luis's hoarse voice came through. Why didn't you answer the phone? I hung up immediately. He called again. I blocked the number. Then another unknown number started calling. Having spent time with Luis, I understood his personality quite well. He had an obsessive streak, not wanting my phone to keep ringing all night. I picked up. What do you want? He insisted. Why didn't you answer my call? I had my phone on silent. He paused for a moment. Before, no matter how late it was, I could always find you. That was before. Before, I kept my phone on 24/7 for Luis, a very dedicated simp. I said, if there's nothing important, I'll hang up. I'm running a fever. Can you come over? I feel terrible. Luis gets fevers easily, and he said it was a side effect of his surgery. I used to always worry when he had a fever, fearing it would affect his heart. But after asking the doctor, I learned it was just an immune system response and had nothing to do with his heart. After that, I felt reassured. No time. And don't forget what you said before. I hung up the phone. Chapter 10. Luis lay on the sofa, with more than a dozen phones scattered on the coffee table. No matter which phone number he used to call Alice now, they all went straight to voicemail. He couldn't accept it. Alice, who had always been so obedient, actually ignored him. At first, when Alice said those things in the private room, although he was angry, he didn't really believe her. Everyone knew how much Alice adored him. There was no way she could leave him. In the end, wasn't she just pretending to be pitiful in the bathroom, trying to gain his sympathy? But he wanted to punish her. How dare she say she'd leave him? That's why he poured cold water on her. When she left, he also said harsh words to her. But it wasn't the first time he had said such things. And every time, she would come running back to him. He always believed that this time would be like every other time they had argued. Alice surely wouldn't last more than 2 days before coming back to him. But 2 days passed, and there was no sign of her. 2 weeks went by. Still nothing. A month later, unable to bear it any longer, he called Alice's number, only to find he had been blocked. He couldn't tolerate this, so he deliberately found out her whereabouts, knowing she was out for afternoon tea, and followed her there. He even intentionally acted affectionate in front of her, hoping to provoke her anger, but she didn't react. She walked away calmly, without a second thought. She actually just left. The doorbell rang. Luis immediately got up from the sofa to answer the door. He just knew that Alice wouldn't be able to let him go. That after hearing about his fever, she'd definitely come looking for him. But when he opened the door, it was Roma standing there. Roma looked worried. I heard you had a fever. Are you all right? Why is it you? Luis lay back on the sofa, disappointed. Roma took out the medicine she had brought. I'll get you a glass of warm water so you can take your medicine. I won't take it. If you don't like medicine, I'll make you some ginger tea. It will help you sweat and break the fever. I won't drink it. Roma suddenly went quiet for a long time before speaking softly. Is it only if Alice comes that you'll take your medicine? Luis, I used to be the one you liked the most. Luis lay there, his arm resting on his forehead, covering most of his face. His voice was muffled. I'm sorry. I don't know. Hearing such an uncertain answer, Roma suddenly became agitated. She was just my stand-in. You've been tormenting her. There's no way you like her. You just got used to having her around. Now that I'm back, you'll forget her and get used to me. Luis remained silent. Roma's eyes turned cold. Luis, do you think Alice treated you so well because she liked you? She treated you the same way she treated her ex. Luis suddenly opened his eyes wide. What do you mean? She had a long-term relationship before you, her first love, who died in a car accident. Before he passed, he signed an organ donation agreement, and it just so happened that around that time, you had a heart transplant surgery. Bang! Everything on the table was swept to the floor. Chapter 11. The next evening, Roma suddenly contacted me. Luis refuses to take his medicine, and now he's delirious from the fever. Can you come over and talk to him? No. Just after hanging up Roma's call, another call came through. This time, it was one of Luis's friends. How can you be so heartless? You were with Luis for more than a year, and now you can't even come and see him when he's sick. I hung up. After that, 7 or 8 more calls came in, almost all of them from Luis's friends, calling to berate me for being heartless. But no one remembered how Luis had tormented me. Roma called me again. Luis just said his heart hurts. I froze for a moment. Send me the address. But when I found Luis, he was perfectly fine, sitting on the sofa. Roma and those friends who had bombarded me with calls were all sitting around him, looking at me with eyes full of ridicule. It was Roma who spoke first. Do you believe it now? Luis's face darkened, and he smashed the water cup on the table onto the floor. Alice, how dare you treat me like a stand-in? I wasn't surprised that he had found out, but I hated that he would make jokes about his heart. Don't do something like this again. It's childish. What does that have to do with you? He pounded his chest. I bought this heart with my own money. I can do whatever I want with it. Luis seemed to lose control. He became feral and hysterical. I knew all too well the stubbornness that lay deep within him. Prideful as he was, there was no way he could accept being used as someone else's substitute. It could only be him treating me as a replacement. He might even retaliate in crazy ways. But I wasn't scared. I had nothing left to lose. I decided to leave. Luis picked up a teacup and threw it, hitting me square on the forehead. Alice, just you wait. Don't think for a second that you'll have it easy. Blood trickled down my forehead. I clenched my fist but eventually loosened it. Turning to leave. Chapter 12. Elise applied medicine to my wound, complaining as she did. Is Luis out of his mind? He hit you so hard. I was lost in thought and didn't say anything. You should be careful for a while. I'm worried he might do something worse to you. I nodded to assure her. Elise finally looked at me, hesitating. I smiled. I remember. I'll go see Ryan tomorrow. Elise hugged me, extending her arms. Remember, you're not alone in this world. No matter what, I'll be here with you. You have to get better soon. However, the diagnosis at Ryan's was not optimistic. My severe depression had not improved at all. Ryan's brows were furrowed tightly. Your situation is worse than the last time. I don't know what could break your emotional pillar, but I hope it never happens. If it does, Alice, I hope you can make it through. I looked down. Thank you, Ryan. After leaving Ryan's place, I started feeling inexplicably uneasy. When I got home, I found Luis standing at my door, his demeanor dark and unsettling. His entire body exuded an aura of rage and the strong smell of alcohol. Chapter 13. I ignored him and tried to unlock the door. He grabbed me forcefully, and his lips crashed down on mine. The overwhelming scent of alcohol enveloping me. Some painful memories began to surface. My body started trembling uncontrollably. Almost instinctively, I pulled out the knife that I always carried in my bag. The tip of the knife was pointed directly at his heart. Just as I was about to stab, my clouded mind began to clear, and I forcefully held myself back. Luis noticed too. He released me and held my hand, the one holding the knife. His bloodshot eyes stared at me. Come on, stab me right here. I tried to pull my hand back, but he pushed it forward. The knife had already torn through his shirt. I yanked my hand back hard. Luis, what the hell are you doing? Luis laughed wildly, pointing to his heart. You care so much about this, don't you? You think as long as it keeps beating, Sam is still here in this world? I'm telling you, Sam is long gone. He's dead. That day, there was someone else who also received a heart transplant along with me. He's the one who got Sam's heart. And after surgery, he suffered rejection and has already died. Sam doesn't exist anymore. My blood froze in an instant, and his words pierced through my ears like blades. My mind buzzed, and everything went blank. Shut up, Luis. Just shut up. I didn't want to hear him speak anymore. I took out my keys, trying to open the door, but no matter what I did, I couldn't fit the key into the lock. Again and again, the key slipped from my trembling fingers. I numbly picked it up, over and over again. Look at it! See for yourself. This is proof that Sam no longer exists. Luis threw every piece of paper evidence he had found right in front of me. The words on those pages were like sharp carvings, stabbing into my eyes, letter by letter. In an instant, something inside me shattered. I had always been an orphan, always alone. In the past, I thought my life would always be covered in darkness. Then Sam appeared, tearing a crack through that darkness and letting light in. He, with his top grades, tutored someone like me, always at the bottom, dragging my scores up to make it into a prestigious university. After the entrance exams, he helped estimate my scores, chose schools, and picked my major for me. It wasn't until the acceptance letter arrived that I realized he had chosen the same university as me. I was so angry I cried. With his grades, he could have chosen a far better school. He just said that the major he chose was one of the best at that university. To ease my concerns, he even brought me to meet his parents, showing me that they supported his choice. I always thought I held him back. So, I worked hard in college, aiming for every scholarship. After graduation, I pushed myself to secure a permanent position at a big company. I was slowly getting closer to Sam. When happiness was finally within reach, Sam was gone. The lighthouse went dark. Later, when I learned he had donated his organs, a small spark reignited in my world. I thought, as long as his heart was still beating somewhere, I could keep holding on. But now, everything had collapsed. My gaze turned hollow. Those words on the papers twisted, grew, and then swallowed me whole. All my senses began to dull. Luis, with his red eyes, was yelling at me, but it was as if the scene was muted. Playing in slow motion, he grabbed my shoulders and shook me violently, shouting something at me. I couldn't hear him. The sound took so long to finally reach my ears. Alice, wake up! Wake up! Why? I am awake. Chapter 14. I was hospitalized. Elise stayed by my side all the time. There was another person who seemed to visit me every day, but Elise always kept him away. I had seen him from afar a couple of times. I didn't know who he was. I only recognized Elise. He came again today, and Elise pushed him down to the ground floor so he couldn't see me. I ran to the lounge to watch TV. The patients who usually watched TV with me were already sitting there. I always watched the same episode. I liked repeating the one where the heroine jumps off the cliff. At first, I thought he would ask me to watch another episode, but when I played the same scene over and over again, he just looked at me without saying anything. It was the same today. I watched the heroine jump twice, and I was planning to return to my room, but then I thought that he only ever watched this one episode with me every day, which seemed kind of sad. So I decided to make up an ending to the story for him. After the heroine jumps off the cliff, an old lady finds her and takes her in to heal her injuries. When she gets better, the old lady realizes how pretty she is and sells her to a brothel, making a lot of money. The man turned to look at me. That's not what you said yesterday. You said that the heroine was caught by a crane halfway through her fall and taken up to heaven to become a maidservant for the goddess Chang'e. Since the heroine was beautiful, Hou-Yi fell in love with her. When Chang'e found out, she hated Hou-Yi for cheating, but she couldn't bring herself to kick the heroine out. So she killed Hou-Yi. I blinked. Did I talk to you yesterday? He nodded. All right. I'm used to it by now. My mind can't hold on to memories. A nurse called me back to take my medicine. The nurse told me, "It looks like your friend is arguing with that man downstairs." I swallowed the colorful pills and pulled open the curtain to look outside. Sure enough, Elise was arguing with that man. She looked really agitated. The nurse said, "If you want to go down and see, I can accompany you, but only for a short time." I shook my head. No, Elise doesn't let me. The nurse praised me. You're the most obedient patient I've ever met. Chapter 15. Downstairs, Luis, with red-rimmed eyes, begged Elise, "Can you let me go up to see Alice, please?" Elise looked at him coldly. "Even if you kneel and beg me, it won't work. Don't forget, it's because of you that Alice ended up like this." Luis closed his eyes. He didn't dare recall Alice's appearance that day. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She just sat there, so calmly, crouched on the ground. She showed no reaction to anything from the outside world. Like a soulless puppet. He hadn't realized how much that revelation would affect her. All he just wanted to make her feel as miserable as he did. He wanted her to understand that he had nothing to do with Sam, that he wasn't a substitute for anyone, and that if she was going to love anyone, It had to be Luis himself. Please, let me go up and see Alice, okay? I want to tell her that this heart really is Sam's, even if she takes me as a substitute. I don't care. Elise sneered. You wanted revenge on Alice because you thought she treated you as a substitute, right? You felt wronged and angry, didn't you? Did you forget that Alice was just someone you used as a stand-in? You even tortured her in so many ways. Do you know? Do you even realize? Elisa's eyes turned red. One of those calls in the middle of the night you made to mess with her almost cost Alice her life. A rainy night. Drunken thugs. A dark alley. Alice was attacked. If it hadn't been for her attachment to Sam, she wouldn't have survived. Elise wiped away her tears. Now that Alice is like this, are you happy? Does your revenge feel satisfying? Then just leave, and never come back to bother Alice again. Alice was attacked. Luis kept shaking his head, stumbling backward until he finally fell to the ground. Alice had been attacked because she went out in the middle of the night to do something for him. Chapter 16. I had another nightmare. A man reeking of alcohol dragged me into an alley, and I struggled desperately. But that only seemed to excite him even more. The rain mixed with my clothes as he tore them apart. Raindrops fell on my skin, and I trembled continuously. I cried, pleading, please, let me go. Please, please, I'll give you money. Please. But my cries, my begging, only seemed to make him more excited. He violently ripped away the last of my clothing, pinning my neck as he moved against me. The overwhelming stench of alcohol assaulted me from every direction. The torment felt like being ripped apart by a beast, and it went on for what seemed like an eternity. I could no longer cry. Lying numb in the dirty corner, I was dirty too, from midnight until dawn, stopping, only to start again, over and over. The beast finally moved away from me, spitting in disgust. That's what you get for wandering around at night. You deserved it. I thought it would be better to die. Alice. Alice. Someone was calling my name over and over. I tried to open my eyes, and I saw Elise, her eyes red, looking at me. Are you okay? She hugged me. That's when I realized my face was already wet with tears. I'm fine. Just another nightmare. The one I've told you about. Elise's body went stiff. It's okay. It's not real. Just a dream. Chapter 17. I continued my treatment in the hospital. That man still waited downstairs every day, but he no longer bothered Elise. And Elise didn't have to put in all the effort to stop him. I still watched the same episode of the drama every day. The one where the protagonist jumped off the cliff. The man who watched TV with me was always there too. Every day. I had to rack my brain to come up with a new ending to the story. And he always said, "That's not what you said yesterday." I didn't care what I said yesterday. I stayed in the hospital for a very long time. So long that I no longer enjoyed watching the same episode over and over. And I could remember what I had said the day before. I stopped making up story endings for the man who watched TV with me. And then he asked me, "When will you be discharged?" I shook my head. "I don't know. We'll have to ask Elise." "What about you?" I asked. "They'll probably discharge me a week before you." Oh. I complied with all the treatments and took my medication on time. One morning, everything suddenly became clear in my mind. After taking my medicine, I looked down at the man who had been waiting day after day, and calmly said to Elise, "Elise, I want to go down and talk to him." Elise was a little stunned, then her eyes reddened. "I'll go with you." I shook my head. No need. When I went downstairs, he had already seen me, but he didn't dare approach. He just watched me from afar. I called out to him, "Luis." He seemed to freeze, staring at me in disbelief, his eyes wide. "I have something to say to you." After a long while, he finally began to run toward me. It wasn't a long distance, and it was flat ground, but he fell twice, clumsily. He got up and finally stood in front of me, panicked like a child who had done something wrong. "Alice, have you remembered everything?" I nodded. "Maybe." He immediately started apologizing, slapping himself several times. "I'm sorry. I was wrong. I shouldn't have done all those terrible things from the beginning." "Alice, can you forgive me?" I shook my head and stepped back. I won't forgive you. I came down to tell you not to come anymore. Let's each live our own lives. Chapter 18. But it seemed Luis didn't listen to what I said. He still showed up downstairs every day. I no longer paid attention to him and continued cooperating with my treatment. I found out that the man who watched TV with me was named Ethan. Since I stopped watching the same episode repeatedly, he would occasionally bring some quirky little gadgets for me to play with. They were strange but really fun. Today, he brought some small rubber figures that could stick to the wall and then flip down by themselves. I threw all 6 figures at the wall simultaneously, propped my chin in my hands, and watched them flip down slowly. I said, "Ethan, I'm getting discharged next week. Congratulate me." Ethan calmly said, "Congratulations. You should also take your medicine on time and cooperate with the hospital's treatment to be discharged soon." Ethan said, "I'm getting discharged tomorrow. I'm done playing." Every time I played games with Ethan, he was always better than me. I thought I could beat him this time with the discharge date, but I still ended up behind. Ethan looked at me, his eyes showing a hint of a smile. "It's all right. I can come pick you up then. No need. Elise can take me." Chapter 19. On the day I was discharged from the hospital, Luis was waiting downstairs with a bouquet of flowers. He looked much more mature and composed. Elise had told me that he had recently started taking over his father's company. "Alice, congratulations on getting discharged." Luis walked over and handed me the flowers. Elise blocked him immediately. "The best gift would be for you to never appear in front of Alice again." Luis was still persistent. "If you ever need any help, please feel free to reach out to me. I'll do whatever I can." Without turning back, I closed the car door. After another half-year of recovery at home, I decided to look for a job. But once companies learned about my medical history, the response was always the same: "Sorry, but you may not meet our company's requirements for this position." Later, I received a call from Luis. "Alice, I heard you're looking for a job. You can come work at my company." "No need. Thank you." I hung up the phone and kept sending resumes. Elise told me not to push myself too hard, saying she could support me for the rest of my life. I laughed while pinching her face. "Thank you, but tonight I'm staying up to send more resumes." Elise huffed, stomping her foot. "I'm serious." After sending out resumes for a long time with no response, I finally received a call inviting me to an interview. I waited in the company meeting room for a long time, but the interviewer never showed up. Just when I thought I might not get the opportunity, Gu Jingqing appeared at the door. "Sorry. I was handling something urgent. I'm sorry for making you wait." I widened my eyes in surprise as I looked at him. Then I heard the person beside him call him, "Ethan." "Ethan owns the company?" Elisa's surprised voice almost brought down the building. I sipped my milk tea and nodded. Then why was he in the hospital? To be precise, he was accompanying his grandmother. The person who was sick was his grandmother. She only allowed people dressed in hospital gowns to approach her, so Ethan had to wear one. We just misunderstood. "So, did you get the job?" I nodded. "Yes." Chapter 20. Entering Ethan's company wasn't easy. There were no secrets in the company. Only a week after I joined, my colleagues already knew about my medical history. However, no one dared to make things difficult for me, because Ethan had openly stated that he had personally recruited me. The only person who made things hard for me was Ethan. He personally guided me, giving me all his knowledge, but was also incredibly strict. There were many times when he scolded me harshly. Didn't I emphasize this over and over again? "Why are you still making mistakes?" "I'm sorry. I'll make sure to be careful next time. The damage is done. I'll deduct half a month's salary as a warning. Don't let it happen again." But I didn't hate Ethan. I could still tell the difference between good and bad. I knew he did it for my own good, and thanks to his strict guidance, I was growing fast. Cooking for him was the price he asked me to pay for learning from him. I don't remember how many meals I've made for Ethan. Today, after work, I cooked sweet and sour ribs for him. He took a bite and frowned. "It seems you added too much sugar. It's too sweet." I moved the dish in front of myself. "Eat it if you want. Or don't." He looked at me and smiled lightly. "Alice, you're getting bold." At first, when I cooked for Ethan, I was very careful to cater to his tastes. Each time I finished a dish, I'd ask if it was too salty or bland, and quietly noted his preferences, telling him I'd improve next time. Now, I didn't bother so much. Now is off work time. Ethan. He shook his head with a smile, but still ate all of the sweet and sour ribs and took care of washing the dishes afterward. The days went by one by one. At the company's annual event, I climbed a ladder to hang garlands in the office. The person holding the ladder left for a bathroom break, and I didn't notice. As I leaned back slightly, the ladder started to wobble. I fell with the ladder. I heard screams of panic around me. I ended up in the hospital again. Fortunately, the ladder wasn't very high, and I only had scrapes and bruises. I sat in the consultation room, waiting for my colleague to pay the medical fees, when I saw Ethan striding towards me. Before I could ask him how he got here so quickly since he was supposed to be in a meeting with another company, he suddenly hugged me tightly. "Why are you so careless?" I froze for a moment. "Ethan," he said, "just let me hold you for a moment." At that moment, all the sounds around me seemed amplified, hearing the cries of children and the scoldings of their parents mixed in. But at the same time, it felt like I couldn't hear anything. I reached out to push him away. His hoarse voice came again. "Give me a chance, Alice. Let me pursue you." I pursed my lips, still intending to push him away, but he had already let go of me. Only then did I realize that his eyes were red. I said softly, "Do you know why I was hospitalized? I'm really sick. I still have a lover I can't forget. Also, before I bit my lip, I was assaulted. What you see of me now is normal, but I can't be sure what might cause another relapse in the future. I'm broken, not worthy of anyone's love." He raised his hand, gently covering my eyes. "Never underestimate yourself. If someone loves you, then you're worthy of that love. I like you, no matter what you are like." I sniffled, my eyes a little wet. Thankfully, his hand was covering my eyes, giving me somewhere to hide. "I'm sorry," I said. "For now, I haven't moved on from Sam. Being with you wouldn't be fair." He withdrew his hand and ruffled my hair. "I'm just pursuing you, not asking you to be with me immediately. If one day you're ready to move forward, remember, come to me, all right?" The hospital was bustling, with constant noise from the people coming and going, but the corner that Ethan was holding for me felt peaceful and calm. I nodded. "All right. Spring will always come when flowers bloom." Chapter 21. Office building. The assistant walked into Luis's office. "Boss, Miss Alice fell off a ladder and got hurt." Luis immediately stood up from his seat. "Which hospital is she in?" The assistant took out his phone. "Maybe you'd like to see this picture first." In the hospital's consultation room, Ethan was bending over, wrapping Alice in his arms, as if he was holding a treasure. Luis slumped back into his seat, lowering his head, and didn't say anything for a long time. The assistant continued to report. "Miss Roma has come again. Do you want to see her?" "I won't see her. Tell her she can have all the money she needs, as long as she never comes to find me again." The assistant nodded. "Also, boss, the hospital report is out. Your heart condition isn't looking good, and you need to be hospitalized for treatment as soon as possible. Otherwise, it could affect your ability to work and live normally. There's no need, and don't report this to my parents either. But boss, your health." Luis rubbed at his aching heart and waved the assistant away. "I know my own body. Did you find that person?" The assistant paused for a moment before realizing Luis was referring to the person who had once assaulted Miss Alice. "Yes, we found him. He got out of prison a week ago, but it seems he committed another crime and got arrested again. This time, he was sentenced to life imprisonment." It's said that. The assistant carefully glanced at Luis. "It was Ethan's doing." Luis lowered his head and gave a bitter smile. As he smiled, sobs began to break through. The assistant quietly left the office. A long time later, Luis finally raised his head. Once he had composed himself, he called Alice. "Hello. I'm sorry, Alice. Truly, I'm sorry," Luis said. "From now on, make sure you're happy. And goodbye."